Hello, everybody, and welcome to the next episode of Christian Emotional Recovery's YouTube channel. I'm Rachel Leroy, and I wanted to talk a little bit today about the difference between toxic positivity and healthy optimism. Bear with me, I'm looking at my computer here because that is my notes, so bear with me. But the difference between toxic positivity and authentic, healthy optimism. And the reason I wanted to talk about this is because in our society, this concept of toxic positivity and bypassing has become something that we hear about and talk about more. And I think that's a good thing, but I also think it can go too far out of balance the other way. I remember reading a meme or something that said something about like, if somebody's got a problem and they're in pain, learn the art of listening and don't share any kind of experience or story with them, because then you make it about you. And I'm like, wait a minute. All these people on the bottom of the article were responding and saying, I share personal experiences not to talk about myself, but so that person knows they're not alone and to make a connection. So I think it depends on the context of the situation and how much you talk and how much you listen. So the whole point of this video is to talk about where is there a balance between not having toxic positivity and bypassing and being sensitive, but also where do you draw the line at being genuinely optimistic. So, I think that there could be a lot of debate there. So I'm just going to provide some insights on that a little bit and talk about first what they are, two, how they can get out of balance on both sides, and then two, where's that happy medium that's in the middle. I think one issue with our society these days in terms of religion, politics, and a lot of areas is that people want to take extremes on everything. And that's where a lot of people in our society have lost their ever-loving minds. They've gone so far off the right, they've fallen off the edge of the earth. They've gone so far off the left, they've fallen off the edge of the earth. You get what I'm saying? And so people want to take extremes on things. And I'm not saying that riding the fence is the answer. Having convictions is important. But also finding a balance in a lot of these areas is healthy and actually the best way to function. So, and that's where people meet in the middle, in the meeting of minds when they disagree as well. So, just a little bit about this channel. If you'd like to support it, please click the Patreon link below and check it out. You can get exclusives you can't get anywhere else, like downloads of the Acorn meditation, exclusive access to the podcasts a week early, exercises and journals you can't get anywhere else, and you can get more as you go higher in the tiers, and you can start at just $5 a month. That helps me to help you. This isn't just about money for me. This is about being able to pay my bills, make a living, and pay for the podcast, and also to be able to do this while having some health issues and working too. So it helps me and eases life for, just in general, to be able to do this and spend more time on this, which is what I really want to do to help you. Thank you so much. Also, check out the Facebook group and the podcast, also known as Christian Emotional Recovery. Subscribe, whatever, join, but please feel free. You're invited to join. Check them out below. So, the difference between toxic positivity and healthy optimism. Bear with me because I'm kind of doing this one off the cuff. I don't have any sources, but I've read a lot about this. I've experienced this a lot. I know a lot about this topic. But toxic positivity is basically when somebody denies reality, denies the pain that somebody's going through, and they do something that's often called bypassing. Bypassing is like when you go to a church and you're experiencing pain and people are like, oh, God's got this. Oh, you'll be all right. Just be positive. Or maybe even like if you tell them you're going through something and they're like, have faith, read more scriptures. You don't have enough faith. That's bypassing. And I'm sure most of us who've experienced trauma have been hurt by somebody who has been in that situation. Who said that to us when we're in that situation, and that's hurtful. And it should be hurtful. You're human, and that's not the right way to respond to something like that, even if the person means well. And toxic positivity, though, is when somebody denies reality and they're trying to be positive by sweeping things under the rug and denying what's real. And when you do that with somebody else, it can be very unhealthy, it can be very hurtful, it can be very damaging, and it can even re-traumatize somebody depending on the situation. But then there's also healthy optimism. And I feel like it's something in our society that we've kind of lost, especially after COVID. But even just our generation, it seems like everybody is so cynical about everything. And nobody just thinks it's going to work out. It's going to be okay. Everything's going to be all right. God's got this. Everything is going to get better. I do believe that. And I do say that to myself all the time. And when I read books from older teachers and previous generations and the older generations, I've noticed that they tend to do that a lot more than the younger generations, who tend to be a lot more cynical, a lot more fragmented, if that makes sense. And so you can take it to the point that if somebody even says something positive or optimistic in a difficult situation, that somebody is like, that's bypassing, that's toxic. And I think you have to be really careful on both extremes there. You can re-traumatize somebody, you can invalidate them, but I think when it comes to like what you say to yourself, and I think when it comes to what you say to other people, being honest, but also having a positive spin on it without invalidating that person, validate their experience, be there with them, feel with them. That's what compassion is. It literally means to feel with somebody. If somebody's celebrating, celebrate with them. If they're grieving something or someone, grieve with them. If they're going through a difficult emotional situation, just listen and don't try to fix it. There's a time and a place for fixing, but there's also a time and a place just to listen. And I'm sure that you've been in a situation where you've been on both ends of that. I know I have. And maybe you look back and you're like, I didn't handle that too well. Or you were able to be there as an embodied presence with that person without judging, without rushing, without pushing, without forcing, without fixing. Now that's different than somebody who just keeps feeling sorry for themselves, wallowing in their misery. They're not actually trying to find a solution. They're not trying to work their way through it. After months, weeks, years, depending on the situation, there's a gray area there, obviously. Like I said, the whole thing about sharing your experience with somebody, when somebody is talking about this stuff, it's important to listen. It's important when we're going through something to find somebody who can, without judgment, just listen and be that embodied presence for us, whether it's a rabbi, a preacher, a priest, a therapist, a friend, a family member, a spouse. Somebody, though, that we feel safe with, that can validate us, not somebody that's like, don't feel that way, it's going to be okay. When they say that, it depends on how it's said. You know what I mean? I think you can kind of instinctually get what I'm saying there. It depends on how it's being said, or if they're like, you don't have to feel that way. That's bypassing. That's toxic positivity when there's actually fear under that because they don't want to face that you're going through something, or maybe you don't want to face that you're going through something. But it's important that we acknowledge what we're feeling and that we are able to express that in a healthy way where we feel safe and we have an embodied presence, even if it's just taking it to the Lord, taking it to God and praying about it. And that's the first place you should go, obviously. Prayer, and just journaling it out, and then talking to somebody that we trust. But then also having a constructive point of view on it, accepting what you can't change, and then what can I change, and then, trying to consider the best possible outcomes, and believing that things can work out, and believing things will get better, and having faith that God is with you. That's a healthy optimism, not a toxic positivity and a bypassing. Bypassing, I believe you can do both at the same time. Being honest about the situation, processing it in a healthy way, having an embodied presence to share that with, or being an embodied presence so somebody else can share theirs with you, and not judging and just listening and not trying to fix. And then inserting some optimistic reinforcement after that, where, maybe this will work out. Things are going to be all right. Things will get better. If it's a specific situation, talking out positives that can come out of it. even if it's not a fun situation. Talking about the fact that if something, there's some research somewhere, I can't remember where, but it said what we fear doesn't happen 85% of the time. I'll say that again. What we fear doesn't happen 85% of the time. And just reminding yourself of things that are reassuring like that, and reminding yourself of the possible positive outcomes, and being optimistic that everything can turn out okay, and continuing to go towards the positive and the encouraging, listening to positive, encouraging messages, listening to uplifting music, listening to God tell you good things. That's not toxic positivity. That's not bypassing. That's inserting healthy healing into a situation that's difficult. And that's different than the toxic positivity that denies it altogether. Do you see the difference? So it's kind of like Toby Mac's song, Speak Life. Speak life into a situation doesn't mean you don't talk about how painful it is. It doesn't mean you don't express how scared you are. It means that you do that and you speak life into the situation. Does that make sense? I've had a lot of scary health issues, and I keep saying there's a lot of options I have for treatments. There's a lot of things I can do to make myself feel better physically and mentally. I can't assume worst case scenario outcomes of how this is going to turn out. And, usually, not always, but usually things don't turn out in the worst case scenario. They really don't. And like I said, 85% of the time, what you fear never happens. That's pretty darn good. So just think about that when you get afraid and you start speculating and overthinking. I know I am the worst at it. I struggle with that to this day. And I want you to know that you can work with that. It's hard. It's very hard, but you can work with it. And there are so many, just opening yourself up to tools and possibilities and being realistic and being optimistic at the same time, and encouraging yourself and going to those positive, reassuring, safe places and having that embodied presence to talk about it are all good, healthy things. That's a way that you can reframe it while being honest with yourself and dealing with it for what it is. So I hope this quick, brief video on toxic positivity versus authentic, healthy optimism has been helpful. It's a little short, but to the point, and sometimes that can be helpful too. Thank you so much for listening to me. Check out my Patreon account. Check out Christian Emotional Recovery podcast and Facebook group, all in the links below. And thank you so much for listening. God bless you. And there'll be another YouTube video out soon. Thank you so much.